Hey minions, welcome to Crank It Up. I'm Jim Price, and today I wanted to talk about solo bases. Bases you score by yourself. One of the great things about a game like Smash Up is that it lends itself to many playstyles and local metas. Perceptions differ between players and strategies diverge as a result. But one of the more interesting things I've learned over the years is something that I only realized by reading comments from other players about their games, and that is the rarity of solo bases. Based on what I've read over the years, in many groups, when this happens, it seems like a special occurrence. They claim it doesn't happen often. In fact, I just read 2 comments this morning that imply that it's too easy to get second place in 2 players. This is surprising, as in my group, solo bases happen all the time. I would love for this to be a vocal minority because I have no way of truly knowing. Obviously, I don't keep stats on this, but I would estimate that about 75% of my games feature at least one solo base. We've had games with as many as 5, and that's because we specifically set up plays to make them happen. We also set up plays to break multiple bases in a turn, but perhaps that's another video. Naturally, scoring points when your opponents cannot is a very good thing. And while I usually approach these videos from a 2-player perspective anyway, it's especially true in 2 players, where a solo base can mean denying someone 3 points on the right base. When you look at this mathematically, you can see why this is a good thing. Most bases are 4-2 spreads. If we each win one, we are tied at 6. If I could solo a base for 4 points after that, it would be 10-6. I can subsequently lose on a 4-2 and a 4-3 base and still win. I can win the game 15-14, and I can win the game despite having lost more bases because I focused on quality of wins over quantity, using strategic losses to my advantage. Even if that 4-3 base never comes, I can still lose 2 bases and be in a tie if they have the same distribution. Of course, that margin changes if it's a 3 or 5 point base, but the general point remains clear. Sometimes, the only way to respond to a solo base is with one of your own. This is why you might actually see 4-5 in a game, because of the pressure it puts on the other player. If I get unanswered points, you really cannot afford to give me any more with losses. So how do we set up solo bases? There are many ways that this can occur, and I wanted to go over a few of them today. Perhaps the most obvious way is movement. Movement naturally allows you to spread out and have presence on every base. This does a number of things. First, it lets you do just that, have presence on every base, which allows for a second place finish necessary to secure this strategy. Second, it baits your opponent into playing on every base because they want those points too. The difference is, while you are well equipped to overcome the drawbacks of setting up, they are not, unless they also have movement. Finally, it allows you to pivot to a base of your choice where your opponent is not when the time is right. And this is really a matter of timing because you need a moment when your opponent has no presence on a base. If they are playing on every base, how do you ensure that? It's actually quite simple, and the answer is in my previous example: solo the 3rd scoring base. In my opinion, for movement strategies, the best time to strike is right after you lose a base. Outside of specials or something completely unexpected, a second place loss on their turn means that a new base is opening up where they have no presence and it is your turn. That's the base you want to solo because it's yours for the taking. This is one of my favorite aspects of movement in enabling solo bases. Sure, extra minion plays that later converge on an open base where an opponent did not go is great, but this is the type of play that is seemingly impossible to defend against outside of specific cards. The second way to set up solo bases is to focus on removal and control. Movement gives you the surprise burst, but there are many plays that can make a solo base inevitable. Leprechaun does this very well. Depending on the matchup, you can potentially carve out a base where they cannot play, and it's only a matter of time before it goes to you solo. They know it, and you know it. To a lesser extent, a card like Overrun can accomplish this as well, as it buys you a turn that is hard to mitigate unless you have movement or action destruction, although the latter is hard to burst with because you lose half of your turn. Kitty Cats can also do this well, applying pressure to keep your minion count down while they build up presence on a base, eventually scoring it by themselves. In theory, anyone with renewable destruction can do this, if they can keep your minions off the board. It's only a matter of time before it happens. Magical girls can accomplish this with power made in techno-magical lasts, pushing away or destroying anyone to maintain constant pressure. But there's always a chance that someone just chooses to accept second place losses on their turn, pushing through to prevent the solo base. This leads us to the third method, which is to create a solo base during scoring with specials. A base may start scoring with multiple players, but it doesn't have to finish that way. I have always advocated knowing what an opponent can do to you with specials, but it's extremely important with solo bases. You need to know how many minions can be removed, and while this is also true of the second type, it is even more deflating when you lose presence at the last moment. Even if you know that a deck contains those removal specials, you are still chancing that they may or may not have them. The best possible outcome is a solo base when it is not your turn, but it is much easier to set this up on your turn. Use someone's presence for efficient scoring, then remove them at the last second. Tornadoes do this well, princesses do this well, ninjas do it okay, but it generally costs an extra minion, although I find it to be generally worth it. Basically, anyone with special actions is what you want, because it requires fewer cards. To defend against this, you generally need to commit more resources than the players can remove, which makes your victory more efficient, which makes it easier to solo a base, which leads into the next type, the big drop. This is the most straightforward kind, the kind that deals the majority of damage on one turn. Just play cards and throw as much as you can to break a base. While big drops can be done on a base where an opponent already played, this can also be done on an empty base. Because these are pretty self-explanatory, I won't go into too many examples, but this is nothing new. King Rex and Rampage have been a Jungle Oasis solo score since day one. The final type that I wanted to go over is what some friends have started calling Bandit plays, a label to which I am not opposed. I am a big proponent of the high upside, crazy plays that are often unpredictable, that generally rely on saving cards for a specific moment. This type of playstyle relies on creating your own opportunities and being willing to commit to making them happen. They usually involve multiple turns to achieve payoff, but it's worth it. It's difficult to describe these plays without explicitly showing them, and I prefer to keep them to myself so that I can use them. But I'm happy to share one that I'm particularly proud of. I was playing Shapeshifter Vigilantes, whom I've mentioned as being strong, but generally relying on trick plays. Well, this is one such play. Ancient Dojo was out, which is a 5-4-3 base. My opponent needs 5 points to win, and I'm losing overall. I build up a singularly powerful minion with their play on minion buffs and have Doppelganger, requiring a strong showing from my opponent to overtake me to win. He is able to break that base and get 5 points needed to win, which made me really happy because I won. I used the Revenge to move off that singularly powerful minion to the base to the left, and Doppelganger went to the discard pile, allowing me to search for and play a 4 on the same base. The combination of that extra power was enough to break the second base, and since the game doesn't end until phase 5, that scores as well. Because it was a solo base, the extra 4 points was enough to give me a net lead and win the game unexpectedly. When it comes to catch-up mechanics, solo bases are a key way to overcome a lead, but they can also create an insurmountable leads. One of the reasons why I think the Ninja solo base with Hidden Ninja is so worth it is because it allows you to win with second place, and ninjas excel at second place because of Shinobi. If you know how to set up solo bases, you will force your opponent to actively defend against them, which can really throw off their game plan. Does your group favor getting solo bases? What's the most you've ever seen in one game? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Let's shut it down.